Sheldon Show. So today I'm with Professor Hill. She teaches at the University of Texas in Arlington. And what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss some prominent women in history, African American history, prominent black women particularly. But before we begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Professor Hill introduce herself, and then we'll start off with the interview. So.
Yes, good evening, afternoon, good day. My name is Dr. Safisha Hill. I'm an adjunct professor in the Center for African American Studies and Social Work at the University of Texas, Arlington. I also teach with the Dallas County Community College, and I have a Cultural Arts Institute in Dallas in the Oak Cliff area, the SU Dele Fabinro Active Change Institute of Cultural Arts.
Okay. And then also to the bottom of the video in the discussion section, I'll put some of Professor Hill's contact information there if you would love to contact her for any future engagements or anything like that. So we're going to start off with, I'm going to have you, because this is, to be quite honest with you, I tried to do some reading and research with the names that you sent me,
Yes.
but this is also an educational experience for me, so it's going to be less talking from me, and hopefully you'll be able to educate me and the viewers on some of these women. So whoever do you want to start off with?
Well, first I want to say, March is celebrated as Women's History Month.
Yes.
And February, of course, is Black History Month. Well, it's important that we include black women in Women's History Month. Oftentimes they are left out.
Yeah.
And I teach a course on black women, and I love it because so many of us have no idea about these women. We hear the traditional women. When we hear about Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman, then it skips and we hear about Rosa Parks. And then of course we talk about Michelle and Oprah, Maya Angelou, but we don't know about the women warriors who preceded all of us, who paved the way for all of us. One of my favorites to begin with goes back to the 1500s. The mother queen of Angola was called Nzinga. Nzinga means beautiful and courageous queen warrior. In the 1500s, there was issues there with the Portuguese who were trying to enslave the people of Angola. Well, Nzinga was going to fight them. She was actually in her 50s when she began to fight, and she fought the Portuguese for 30 years in defense of her people. And she actually was a queen who did not say, go out and fight. She led her army into battle. She suited and booted up. And she went out and she fought, and she was so beloved that when the Portuguese would enslave Africans and have them to fight on their behalf, when Nzinga showed up, they said, Nzinga is here. And they would join her in fighting the enemy together. So Queen Nzinga of Angola is a very powerful.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, how come no one has made a movie about something?
Exactly. Well, we're waiting on it. Maybe with Black Panther out, maybe we'll begin to look at that. Yes. Really so she's one of my favorite sheroes. And then there's Ya Asantewa of Ghana. She was the queen mother of Ghana, and in around the early 1900s, I think it was 1902, the British were trying to take over Ghana. And there was a symbol called the golden stool. And they wanted the golden stool because whoever sit on the golden stool would rule the people. And so the men were debating whether to give up the golden stool. And when Ya Asante heard about it, she went into the council and she said, how can you even consider giving up what is ours? And she basically told the men, if you, the men, will not fight the white man, we, the women, will. I will gather up my sisters and we will fight the white man until none are left standing on the field. And she was also in her 50s when she started this battle, and she fought. She fought and she fought, and she put the men to shame, and she gathered an army of women, and soon the men came along, but the strength of these women is just wonderful, it's awesome, but we don't hear about them.
Yeah, that's just with the first two people that you talked about, I'm thinking that could have been a Marvel type studio Hollywood movie with a black female, obviously, but I guess that's where we probably
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I should have said Nanny of the Maroons before Asante in terms of timing. In the mid-1800s, Nanny was kidnapped from Ghana, and she was taken to Jamaica, where she's actually a national hero. She escaped to the mountains and took some others with her. And again, the British, they would try to come up and recapture, to take them into slavery. She fought them, and she cut their heads off. Their heads would roll down the mountains as a symbol of don't mess with us. And so Nettie of the Maroons is a national hero in Jamaica, and her face is on the money. And so, you know, these women were bold, and they were all packing something. Which leads us to the early 19th century, around the 1920s, when Ida B. Wells, who was born into slavery in 1862, and her parents died of the yellow fever, and she was the oldest of 6 children, and so she took care of her siblings when they tried to separate them. She said, "No, I will take care of my siblings." She did this. She got a job teaching, and she attended Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. She was a journalist, and she began to write about things. She had 3 friends in Memphis whose stores were burned down by white men because the white men were jealous. And so she wrote about the lynchings, and she began to write about lynchings and record lynchings all over the South. And there was a price on her head. She had to pack a gun for protection. And if you're a journalist and you never heard of Ida B. Wells, there's something wrong. She actually preceded Rosa Parks in being thrown off a train. She was physically thrown off a train. She purchased a first-class ticket, and they put her in the smoking section. And she said, no, this is where I belong. And they threw her off the train. She sued them and won $500 from a lower court, but a higher court overturned it. So Ida B. Wells was a bad woman. She was about my height, about 4'11". She had to pack a pistol for protection. But she was a journalist. And she wrote a book. It's called The Red Book. You can look it up online. And it gives account of the lynchings. And that's really important because, you know, we don't know about these things. And she was a phenomenal woman. And then my other favorite is Fannie Lou Hamer. The reason that we need to vote. In 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer was a member of the Democratic National Party, and she was a sharecropper. She was one of 20 children. And her family shared crop on a farm in Mississippi. Well, when it came time to vote, she knew that she had a right to vote. And so she began to organize other people to prepare them to vote. There's a story that she had gone to another county in Mississippi, and on the way back, the bus was stopped. She and others were arrested. She was put in jail, and the police there forced black inmates to beat her. And they beat her so bad that she lost an eye, and she had damage in her body. But she still didn't stop. So, you know, when I hear black people say, well, I'm not going to vote, I tell them about Fannie Lou Hamer, who almost lost her life because she knew it was important for people to vote. And she organized young people, and her life was threatened, and she was not afraid because she said, well, God is by my side. And so these are some phenomenal women that we need to celebrate, who paved the way for the Rosa Parks and for Oprah and for all these other women whose names we hear today. And this is just important, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many women. And we have the computer in our hand. We can Google black women in history.
The other thing is, I believe in stories. I think stories are really powerful. And I took history when I moved to the U.S., you know, part 1, part 2. And I never heard about any of that. And even in modern day society, though, you still don't hear about these people that you talk about. So I wonder, what do you think would be, because we talked about Black Panther, and as you're talking, I got an idea. What do you think it would mean if, or it could mean, if you had women playing those types of roles in Hollywood? For example, let me go on a little bit longer here before I let you respond. Usually when we see the image of what is beautiful, or whatever the case is a white female, blonde hair, or whatever. A lot of times for the guy, it's a white guy. He's buff, he's tall, he's got hazel eyes or green eyes, or whatever the case is. What impact do you think having these, kind of putting these women more out there into society can have on younger people, specifically minority females, perhaps?
Well, we saw this in the Black Panther with the women warriors.
Yeah.
We saw the strength of these black women who protected their community.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the strength of these black women whose love was so deep that they would give their lives for their people. Mm-hmm. This did so much for so many of us. And we saw the balance there, that women were not subjected and the men were not intimidated.
Mm-hmm. By powerful women.
Exactly, because they understood. And brothers today who are clear on who they are, they understand that if you have a strong black woman, a powerful woman, that she will have your back as well. And it gives little girls big dreams to say, well, she's not playing a maid.
Yeah.
She's not
housekeeper.
She's not promiscuous. She's strong. She's confident, and she don't have a weave in her head.
Yeah.
Because the baldness in this particular
it's funny that you say that. I didn't think of that.
That was their strength,
Yeah.
because there was a tradition that if you want to be a warrior, you had to shave your head. And in many societies, there are rituals that you must go through, that you must either move. If you're a man, you remove your facial hair. If you're a woman, you must cut your hair. If you're going through some rites of passage, if you're going to be initiated in some African spiritual groups as a priest or priestess, you must give up your hair. And for these warrior women, there was a sign. You knew who the warriors were because they were bald and they had patterns in their head that meant something. Yeah. They were spiritual. And just like Solomon's strength was his hair, for these sisters, the strength was the baldness, because Ra could get to that head and give you that energy and that strength that you need, Ra's son. Yeah. Yes. Huh. Hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that until you said that. Yeah.
And it was an honor to become a warrior. And what I found, these women who played those particular roles, they all have martial arts backgrounds. Because you saw them fighting. And they were fighting men, but they were fighting for their country that they loved.
We talk about the fact that we've come so far, whatever the case is, but while we're kind of on Hollywood a little bit, you still hear black women in Hollywood complain that they don't get certain types of roles. They can't. How can I win Best Actress if I'm not getting the roles that are designed for me? What do you think could be done about that? I mean, is there some kind of movement that has to be taking place in Hollywood, or just?
I think that black filmmakers have to step up. Yeah. Because we can't depend on others who don't embrace our culture to put us in positive roles. And there were people who were upset about Black Panther because, oh my God, this majority black cast and they're in all these powerful positions and they're not infiltrated by European ideas, and they praise the ancestors. Yeah. And so I think that when black writers and black filmmakers come together and pool their resources, it's going to be a challenge, but it can happen because there are people who do low budget films. For example, there was a film called Sankofa some years ago. a guy named Halle Jarir out of Howard University, who's from Ethiopia, did this film.
Mm-hmm.
He had to go around the country. He rented out movie theaters to show the film.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome film. And so we have to do things like that to raise a conscience in our community and not so depend on someone else because, you know, they might not see it. And then we have to have writers who know the history.
That's the other thing.
How can you write about Nzinga of Angola if you don't know who she is?
Yeah. You probably never heard of.
Never heard of her. So you have to do that research, and you know, I met a guy from Angola, in fact, some years back, and I said, I carry an African name, and the middle name is Nzinga. I said, I'm Nzinga. He said, oh, we love Nzinga. And I never knew. He said that people today still raise her up. This is hundreds of years back.
Yeah.
And so when we know our story, we can tell our story. We have to know it first.
And I think as you're talking, I'm thinking there has to be a pooling of resources. So, you know, you have people like Oprah or Tyler Perry or whatever the case is. I think they're probably in a better position to probably kind of open up those doors. But at the same time, though, the thing is, I also believe in the common voice, the person who doesn't seem like they have the power, but if collectively, if they were to pull together with the right people, you can do it. Now, I know you kind of did shake your head to that, but Tyler Perry and Oprah do have money. They do have power. But I think it's what you do with the money or the power. Now, this is not to knock them because, you know, I actually like those two people, but you got to really pry that door open for, you know.
Look at Oprah's base.
Yeah.
It's not black women. And she is not going to upset her base to put black women above them. You make a good speech, run for president, yay. No. We have to understand this. In fact, I'll share this with you. Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was told by people who work there that Oprah sent a producer down to look at doing a film. However, they wanted to change it historically, create a fictitious family, and not make the scene so violent as it was in history that it would upset her base. They were going to sugarcoat it. They were going to bring it down because that was very violent when a bomb was dropped on Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921 in the black community. But what they were told, and the producer was a white female, is that they wanted to make it softer. They didn't want to offend their base. So a person can have money, but if they're not really invested in black people, in the true history and culture, well, they're not really going to use their money to move that forward.
What would you say to young people, and in terms of what they can do? Let's put aside the people with money, but just young people who, with ideas, with the technologies that we have, with, you know, you're able to, I think you're able to get people together a whole lot easier, to start a movement, to do things, crowdfundings, you know, different types of ways that you could raise funds online or whatever the case is. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but what would you say to young people who might want to make that kind of move, whether it's Hollywood or just, you know, making things known? What would you say to them?
The first thing I would say, know your history.
Yeah.
I teach my students, if you don't know who you are, anyone can tell you anything about you.
And you probably believe it.
So that's why you have to study to show yourself approved first.
Yeah.
So you study the history, and then you get with like-minded people who have that interest. You find those people who have the skills needed to create a movie, the ones who can write, who can act, who can do the technology work, who know what they're doing. And then you start there. It just might be something in your neighborhood that you can put on YouTube. But you start.
Yeah.
Because we have the technology now in your hand that you can do anything with.
And the potential for so many people to see it.
You can take your phone and film something,
Yeah.
and then you can put it together and splice it, you know. So you find people who have those skills who are like-minded and say, let's do this project.
Yeah. So it's Women's History Month. Where do you think women of color are in America right now? How far do you think we've come? And I'm not going to ask the obvious question, how long it's going to take for us to get wherever,
Well,
but
yes.
just where are women in general in this country in terms of respect and that type of stuff?
There's a shift that I'm seeing. One is as we begin to embrace our natural beauty.
Define that for me.
Natural beauty, we don't need to look like Becky to be appreciated.
That's tough for some people to swallow.
Well, it is, but life is tough.
Yeah.
And we're in a society where we're told that we must create or we must embrace someone else's standards of beauty. When we begin to look at Big Mama and them and say that's beautiful, and when we begin to take somebody else's human hair off our head, when we begin to be naturally beautiful, the energy is going to come strong. And we will become those warrior women that we are supposed to be, rather than be in masquerade all the time, because we're in masquerade.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to be you when you're in masquerade.
Yeah.
We're also seeing more and more black women move into political positions.
Yes, that's
and
true.
that is so awesome.
Yes.
It's like there are so many black women running for office across the nation.
That's true.
And these are bold women who are using their voices. And they are speaking up. And they are saying, well, we're not going to allow other people to define us. God has already defined us. If we understand our history, we know that we are the first humans on earth, and that the oldest human bones were found of a black woman with natural hair. They found her in Kenya. They found her in Ethiopia, in Africa, our homeland. And when we begin to understand who and whose we are, and when we begin to love ourselves and respect ourselves, our little girls will see that.
Let me ask you something. This might be a little bit controversial, but one of the things, let me see if I can eloquently say it so I don't piss off anyone. I don't know if I can say that on YouTube, but I've already said it. One of the things I realize is different to some African Americans and maybe someone from Africa or the Caribbean is a lot of times African Americans tend to try to distance themselves from what you're saying they should try to understand and appreciate. And when I moved here, black kids made fun of me because I spoke a certain way. They told me it was white. I never had a white teacher growing up. We just talked like that. Influence of the British, right? But we just talked like that. And I had a real struggle because when I look back and I think, okay, these young kids, a little bit ignorant, whatever the case is, but back then I couldn't understand why black people, African American kids who were like me, young when I moved here, were having a problem with me because naturally those were the people I wanted to hang out with.
Yes.
You look like me. Yes, you may talk and pronounce your words a little bit different, and I was wearing, I brought some of my garments, my African clothing from home because we proudly celebrate our African heritage.
Yes.
We have weeks and weeks of celebration every year for that. It's a proud thing. But you'll see someone tease someone from Africa because they talk a certain way. So I think to appreciate, to learn your history, you kind of have to appreciate the fact that you came here too.
We're not global.
Yeah.
That's the first thing, that we don't understand globalism. Secondly, self-hatred. Self-hatred runs very deep. Yeah. And because we've been taught religious syndrome is still working against us to dislike each other. And what we also must understand is that when Africans would come to America to study, the message from the colonizers, do not associate with those black Americans. They are dangerous. They will kill you. Yeah. And then you see films like Boys in the Hood and these types of things that are shown in other black countries to put that fear. Why? Because what happens if we come together? and we discover that we're all African people after all, then we begin to build our nation right here. So we can't have that. So things are in place. Television, for example, television. You see these things about Africa, and it's always poor. And there's a Kentucky Fried Chicken dude asking people, "Will give me money to feed these poor, starving children." I had a student who came from West Africa. He said, "I did not know I was poor until I came to America and saw it on television." He called, "Mama, guess what? We're poor." Because the media gives you that impression.
That's all you see.
And we say, "I ain't no African. I ain't no African," because we see an image that we don't want to be
associated.
Exactly. When the reality is that Africa is rich. The people who come here from Africa are rich. Africa has natural resources where there are none here. So when we understand, we have to be taught this because, you know, it's not always taught to us. If you grow up in a household where your parents are African conscious, well, then the children have a whole different perspective. But if you grow up in a household where you're really taught to hate anything that looks like you, and there's evidence when I see the sisters with the blonde wig and the blue eye contact, it's like, that's not natural. Who are you trying to be like? And you can never be like that. And even we understand that here we can get our degrees. We can be very successful. But there's always that mahogany ceiling. It's not even glass. Sisters, for black women, the ceiling is not even glass because we can't even look through it. It's mahogany. And this is what Dr. Julia Harrell told us many years ago. It's mahogany ceiling, so you can't even see through it. You look up and you can't see anything. We have come a long way, but we have not overcome. And we cannot stop and relax and think that we can still make it. We can't assimilate and think that we can still make it. Look at, what's her name, Omarosa. She thought that she could make it, but she found out the hard way that, well, I don't need you anymore. You serve your purpose, you can go now. And until we understand who we are, until we begin to support our own people, and that's natural and normal. Other people do that. Black people are the only ones who want to leave black communities and live among white folk. And so, you know, there's something wrong. White folks don't want to leave and come and live among black people in gated communities. I mean, so we have a long way to go. And again, it goes back to our history, understanding who we are, understanding that God created us in her image, understanding that Father, Mother God is where we come from, knowing that we come from the rich continent of Africa, and that we are here. Those of us that survived, we're here because our ancestors survived the Middle Passage. And so we are the strong ones. Not everyone made it. Some of us, there are bones that line the Atlantic Ocean. But we made it. Our ancestors made it. And so we owe it to them to continue what they started. We owe it to them to be the very, very best we can be, to not give up, to not give in, to learn as much as we can because we're brilliant. We just don't know it. And
a lot has been done to tell us that we're not brilliant.
Exactly.
You know, there's been a lot of just divide and conquer stuff that's happened in history that's led to that. But it's sad, and you see it between black men as well. But you know, I think what you said it eloquently. It's just a matter of people first. Self-hate is a dangerous thing, and a lack of self-awareness is also a dangerous thing. And that is a journey that I think a lot of people say it has to be in the home, because I don't think you're going to get it in schools.
You're not
going to get it in schools. You know, I think parents really have a role to play.
And one thing that we have to get our black women to understand, stop acting like you hate your children. Oftentimes, you will tell a black woman, you'll see her out with a child, and you'll come, "Oh, your baby's so cute." They bad. And that response is not natural or normal, but it's what a lot of black women will say because they've been conditioned to think that black equals bad.
Yeah.
And she usually has.
Hello, welcome back, and we're just gonna pick up where we left off. We were talking about you were talking about what parents should not say to their kids. Let's pick up from there.
Well, there's been times when you would compliment a black woman with her child. Oh, your baby's so pretty, your little boy's so cute. He bad.
Yeah, I do hear that. I really do hear. And then again, I've never thought about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I addressed that.
Yeah.
I said, excuse me, sister, your little boy's what, 2 or 3? Why is he bad? What have you done to make him bad? Then I risk getting beat up, and I say, why don't you say first thank you? And then say, thank you, he's smart too. Or thank you, she's creative too. Or thank you, she's fun too.
I know, they jump to the negative.
Yes, and I did that at a Walgreens. I was somewhere, there was a lady in front of me. She had 2 little girls. I said, oh, your little girls are so cute. They're bad. And I stopped her.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
And I said, let's try this again. And I actually stepped back and walked up again. And I said, oh, your little girls are so cute. She said, thank you.
I know.
And they're smart and they're this. And those little babies, they were like 5 and 6. Their little faces perked up.
Instead of hearing from that age, I'm mad. The psychological, yes, oh, I see it, yeah.
And so when we begin to, and it starts with first self-love.
Yeah.
When you love yourself, you know that you pour into your children what you want them to become.
Yeah.
So for my child, you know, I always said, you're beautiful every day. She's 18 now, and I still call her beautiful. I say, I love you every day. Because that makes her positive and self-confident.
Yeah. So that if someone was to come in your life and they don't treat you with that same type of respect, and you recognize, well, this is not what love is, or this is not what.
And you know that there's some trauma somewhere there, because what happens oftentimes is that our mothers, and mothers are so important. If you look at the Willie Lynch letters, he talks about you need to have the mother to train her son to be physically strong, but mentally weak and dependent. And she raises the boy and girl in the reverse roles. Because you may have heard that mothers love their sons and raise their daughters.
Yeah.
And so you'll see some men who are not strong because mama loved him so much. And he's not good for anybody else. He don't know how to clean up after himself. He can't wash clothes because mama is always there to rescue. If he falls when he's 3, that's one thing. But if he falls and he's 10 or 15 or 20 or 30, and she's always there to rescue him.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the daughter is strong because mother raised her to be strong, but the man is weak. And this is because historically, we've seen our men be made an example. On the plantation, they would take the strong man and they would beat him with an inch of his life. They would tar and feather him and make the woman watch as an example. And they would do it, particularly if she was pregnant, to put that fear in her. And that fear transfers into the womb. And we don't understand that we have to take care of our well-being all the time because it transfers, particularly if you're carrying a child, it transfers into your womb. And we keep seeing the black man disappearing and disappearing and disappearing. I have a theory. May I share it with you? These men who have all these children by these different women. My theory is this. There were men who were forced to be breeders on plantations. Meaning that they would take young girls between the ages of 13 and 20 who would have to have sex with men to make babies for the master to be raised and sold. So you would take a man and he would go in and he would have to have sex with 3 or 4 different women to impregnate them. But he would never be able to be a father to these children.
No.
And I see me and I wonder, was your ancestor a breeder? Because we carry things in our DNA. When you go to the doctor, they ask you, well, do you have anyone in your family who has this and this and this? Because it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, there's no proof, but
Yeah.
that's a theory that I have.
Yeah.
Is that, could it be that you come from a breeder? And so I think women have to understand that we have to support our men. We have to support them. We cannot down them and talk bad about them in front of their children.
Oh, yeah. That's common.
It's common, but it should not be. It's not natural.
No.
And it's not normal. So again, when we the mothers learn how to be women, when we embrace our roles as nurturers, when we become African women instead of feminists, there's a
What's
difference.
the difference?
There's a difference.
Yeah, what's the difference?
The history of feminists is based on white women and her issues with her white man. Whereas he depressed her, he controlled her. So in her liberation, in her fight to be liberated, she began to say, well, I'm a feminist and I'm going to take back my rights. But when she did that, she didn't call on the sisters to join her until she needed the numbers. Historically, when white women, Susan B. Anthony, for example, you'll hear a lot about her during this month. When the black man got the vote before the white woman, she was quoted as saying, I'll give my right arm before I support a black man being able to vote before me. And so historically, white women did not embrace black women. This is why we had to form our own organizations, because they would not allow us, even when we were free, to come and join them in their cause until they needed us in numbers. And we still see that today. Did white women speak out about our sisters who are being brutalized by the police? About the little girls being dragged across the ground by the police? No, and they don't. Until they need numbers. Come and join us in our Women's March. Historically, my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, participated in the Women's Suffrage March in 1913. But they were told, you got to go to the back. My family said, oh no, we're going to the front. And black women have been going to the front ever since. And so people will seek us out for numbers, but don't really embrace us. In the African womanism, we have various roles. We are a nurturer, we are a supporter. We want to be able to connect with our man and not be against him. And so we are the ones in the community who are the mothers. We are the healers. We are the spiritual leaders. We are the ones that are supposed to be the strength alongside with our man. Not behind him, not in front of him, but next to him.
The last person I interviewed, she is a therapist, works with people in the line of domestic violence and all that type of stuff. But she mentioned something that, as you're talking, a lot of men don't know what it is to be, they hear this head of the household, and they don't know really what that is. How would you define that or explain that? This whole idea of head of the household. Because she was saying for a lot of times it's confused to be that you are in control. And for her, head of the household is not, you're controlling the house and what goes on in the house. But it meant that you're working with, kind of like what you're saying, you're working with that person to,
Yes.
How do you rationalize?
Working in concert with,
Yeah.
the head of the household is the provider.
Yeah.
He provides.
Mm-hmm.
He provides. And because if you don't have a father who you see providing, you don't know how to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
My friend, Minister Ricky Clark, says in order to be a man, you must see a man. And the problem with a lot of young boys is that they don't see a man. And what a woman should do is that if the man is not in the house, there are men in the community that she must connect her sons and daughters with who are positive, real models.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when men understand we don't do our rites of passage like we should for our boys and girls and men and women, when they understand that they are supposed to be the provider. I have a friend who said that, well, if I make $30,000 and my wife makes $30,000, we don't make $60,000. because her money is her money. My money is to take care of the household and to take care of her. And she can do with her money what she wants to do with it. Because as a provider, I'm the head of the household and God is my head. And if I'm doing right, then my woman has no problem being submissive. And submissive doesn't mean doing what I tell you, it means supporting you. So even as women, we don't know that submissive means I'm going to support my man, period. Not that, oh, I bow down and do all these things, but we don't understand the language. Because we haven't been taught properly. And we have to understand who and whose we are, again, going back to our history and our culture, and understanding that we've always been equal. On the plantation, we were equal. The sisters were out there with the brothers working and picking cotton. There was no a woman is on the pedestal then. We have always been queens, and our men have always been kings. When we understand that, it's going to balance out. We got a long way to go.
That's a nice place to close. Thank you very much for joining me again. Don't forget to subscribe and share. And then I'll also leave Professor Hill's contact information in the description, so if you would like to contact her. Thank you again, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
That was very educational.